now the Ukraine situation, because it's very related to, I mean, a lot of countries now are suffering. The entire world economy outside of, I mean, China is, I think, having a significant impact from this. They are affected by this, but maybe to a lesser degree than others. But we've seen since the last time we spoke, Russia decided it was time to conduct a special military operation to stabilize, to defend the Donetsk and Lugansk republics. And that has created a really dangerous situation. What is the state of this war now? Because now we're 5 months in, more than 5 months in. And for it seems like a war without victory. The United States and NATO thumped their chests for months, pumping weapons, leveling these intense sanctions. And then the economic situations in all of these countries, the US and NATO countries, started to crumble. What is the state of the situation now? What is the reality of the special military operation Ukraine?
It's very obvious that, at least at face value, the West seems to have severely underestimated Russia on many levels. Their political resolve, their military capabilities, all of this. It seems that they really underestimated Russia, how far they would go and what they're able to do. Now we're hearing all kinds of conversations about how, we thought that the United States and its Western allies, like, these were military superpowers. And now we're seeing all of these vulnerabilities in their industrial base, where they're not really able to keep up with Russian military industrial capacity, which I think is interesting. And I see a lot of analysis by people who seem to be experts, and they're part of these think tanks that seem to be influential when it comes to U.S. foreign policy. And when you watch them from the beginning of this operation all the way up until now, and you see how they've completely gotten everything wrong over and over again, and they keep changing their story, and to the point where now, and we're even seeing this in the Western media, where they're starting to kind of admit that maybe Ukraine isn't doing as well as we thought they were. Maybe Russia's doing a little bit better than we thought they were. And what it looks like is that Russia is going to continue taking territory until Ukraine comes to the table and negotiates, or they're just going to keep taking territory until they have as much as they want. What I imagine that they would do would be to take the entire coast. So that means from Kherson in the south, take Nikolaev, take Odessa, and then what's left of Ukraine, what would be Western Ukraine, that would be landlocked, a perpetually failed state that the U.S. and the European Union would be responsible for. It would be when you really think about what they tried to do with Ukraine and how they tried to harm Russia through using Ukraine, the fact that it would boomerang around and hit them like this is kind of a sense of irony, I think.
Yeah. Let's talk about, because what you're saying is that Russia is going to continue to progress within its goals, and even beyond its goals. Really, this is about trying to force some kind of settlement, right? That will be beneficial to Russia and, of course, beneficial to the people of Eastern Ukraine. It seems like the United States and NATO has no interest in that, so that's why we've had weeks and weeks and weeks of continued war, or at least continued special military operation, if we were going to be more precise. Why is it that NATO has not? Because the United States and NATO, they present themselves. I mean, I just heard Ro Khanna, right? When he's talking about China, he literally said on CNN to Wolf Blitzer, he said it would be a disaster if China, retaliated or responded to a Pelosi trip, and we're going to get to that. But when he cited NATO as being the reason for that. They saw how NATO came together and responded to Russia with sanctions and with supporting Ukraine. But it seems like a quagmire. It seems like that, and you've been covering the military side of this. Like, what NATO, what U.S. and NATO countries have the NATO alliance has been sending to Ukraine, and how effective that has been. Could you talk about that part of it? Like, why is it that Ukraine is struggling so much despite getting infused with tens of billions worth of both non-advanced and advanced weaponry, and seemingly having the protection of what is considered the most powerful military in the world, which is NATO countries, NATO, the most powerful military alliance. So what's going on here?
I mean, it's a combination of things. It's a combination of the West creating this myth of their own military invincibility. I think we've seen that kind of unravel over the course of the last 20 years regarding Iraq and Afghanistan, and also Syria. And the U.S. was trying to destroy Syria by proxy. Russia intervened, and they basically stopped it dead in its tracks. And they took back a significant amount of territory that was seized by these U.S.-backed militants. And now we're seeing kind of the same thing in Ukraine, but it's on a much larger scale. Russia is really committed to this. This is large-scale warfare. Another issue, and it might seem, very too straightforward, maybe, but Russia is a bigger country than Ukraine. They have a bigger military. Their military is better trained and better equipped. There were those 7 to 8 years where the U.S. and NATO were training thousands of Ukrainian troops, equipping them, arming them, pumping money into all kinds of military programs, training programs, military infrastructure. But 7 or 8 years, it sounds like kind of a long time. But for something like this, building up a formidable military, it does not happen overnight. It could take many more years to do that. Russia intervened in the middle of this ongoing war in Ukraine before this, before they could create a formidable military. Some people tried to say that it is a formidable military. They're pumping all of these additional weapons into Ukraine. They're saying that, oh, well, this is going to be a game changer. This is going to turn the tide of the conflict. But again, this kind of betrays the realities of warfare. You cannot just send a totally brand new weapon system to a country and they just go into battle and start using it. It's not an episode of G.I. Joe where, the guy jumps out of the airplane and into the tank and he knows how to drive all of them. In reality, it could take years to integrate a new weapon system. And just for an example, and I've used this example many times, the Bayraktar TB2 drone that Ukraine bought from Turkey, that was actually over a long period of time, several years, from the time they signed the contract, sent personnel to get trained, received all of the equipment, set it up, tested it, practiced with it, and then finally started using it in the Donbas region before this most recent conflict started. That happened over the course of several years. And if you think about that and then translate it to what the U.S. is trying to do, send HIMARS in just 2 or 3 weeks, or the M777s. And then there's all of these issues with logistics. These are all the nut and bolt details of a military conflict that so many people in the leadership in the West seem ignorant of. They don't understand this. And they're making decisions that run contra to these realities. And so the outcome is going to be more or less, it's going to be failure.